Hi, I'm Mark Roberts. Welcome to my YouTube station. What's really good, right? You remember I did those videos with Ben Meinel. There was one on how to record a snare drum and how to record a bass drum, kick drum, and things like that. Fairly basic stuff, just showing how I mic up drums. I said I would show you how I mixed them, so I'm going to show you how I mixed them. It's not done in the context of a whole band, obviously, it's just a drum kit. So there's not those challenges at the moment, but this will give you an idea on how I mix drums, and hopefully it will be useful for you and you can try out some of these techniques yourself with your drums. Right, before we dive in, I just want to recommend to you to have a little bit of method to your madness when it comes to mixing. It's something that definitely helps me. I'm showing you round a mix that I've done. So I'm going to show you the close mics and the processing I've done on the close mics, followed by the processing I've done on the drum buses. So the overall mix of the drums. So the first thing I'd recommend you do is just get the mics that you've got there. Don't do any EQ, any compression or anything, and just balance them and get the drums sounding good. Do this at a sensible or even at a quiet level. If you can get your drum kit sounding good quiet, it's going to sound good live. With the typical drum mix, I would do that first, and I'd probably start putting some of my broader strokes on the drum bus so that I have an idea of what the overall kit's like. And then at that point, I'll start cleaning up some of my close mics and adding little bits of compression and EQ here and there, the kind of stuff I'll be showing you. I would then start addressing any problems. But yeah, don't be fooled by me showing you the kick drum first and then the snare and all that kind of thing. That's not how I mix drums. It might be how some people do it, but I suspect that people who do it like that know what they're looking for. They're experienced, that when they're listening to that close kick drum mic, they intuitively know that that's going to work in context with the rest of it. The reason I'm saying this is it can hopefully save you going down the rabbit hole a bit, because a mistake you can often make when you're starting out with this stuff, it's definitely one that I did, is sit there playing around with a snare drum or a kick drum close mic, trying to make the perfect snare sound out of that, where a snare sound is an amalgamation of those mics and the room mics and the overheads and the parallel compression and what have you. So just, yeah, don't get caught up in the details. Have a method and really have fun. Let's dive in. Okay, so the purple channels are all our drums, and in green we've got the auxiliaries, which I'll get to. Let's have a listen to the kick drum first, without any of the processing. So if you've seen my other video on sidechain gating, I'm going to do that thing again. We've done that now. So if you want to know how I did this bit, go and have a look at that. So this is the two mics together with nothing on them. Okay, and then let's have a look at what we've done here. So first I've got the FabFilter Pro Q2, and all I've done here is pull a little bit the extreme lows out. This sort of force of habit, just to allow some headroom and stuff, really. Don't worry too much about that. And I've pulled out something at 246. Let's have a listen. Clearly bugging me at the time. Next in the queue, we've got the Slate Mix Rack. I've got a virtual channel here which emulates analog console. So this has got various settings on it. We've got it on Brit 4KE, which is an SSL emulation. This just recreates the effect of putting something through an analog desk. So when you mix on an analog desk, part of the magic of them is the way they sum the audio and the sort of artifacts you get from the various transformers and things that it goes through in the signal path. So this recreates a bit of that. It's quite a subtle thing, and it's very much cumulative. So you do a little bit of this, a little bit of flavour on all your channels, and it has an accumulative effect, as I just said. So overall, it will help you mix along a little bit. Next, we have an SSL EQ that's doing a little bit of brightening at 8K, a little bit at 2.25K, and a bit of a low boost down at 67. These are pretty minor moves on the close mics. I'll be bussing all my drums to a main drum bus, an auxiliary, and I'll get to it later on, but some of your heavy lifting's done there as well. So with the close mics, I'm doing like fairly subtle stuff here, really. Dude, my dog's distracting me. If you hear me talking about specific frequencies, don't get too hung up on them, because each drum recording or anything recording is different. There's certain areas where you can experiment in. Yeah, just don't get too hung up on specific things, use your ears. Next in the rack we have a bit of compression. This is a sort of Neve style compressor, Like It Matters, and it's got a slow attack, fast release, and we're at a ratio of 2.5, and that will just be doing a small amount of gain reduction just to add a little bit of punch to that close mic. So what I'll do is I'll bypass the individual plugins on this, and I'll put them in slowly, and you can have a listen. All right. Okay, one more time, and I'll just bypass the whole lot and put it back in. Okay, so yeah, fairly subtle, but hopefully you can hear that's just giving it a little bit more punch and a little bit more clarity. Next in the queue, I have the JST Joey Sturgis Tones Clipper. Okay, and let's have a listen with and without that. Without and with that. Cool. Yeah, I think that's again a subtle thing. Clipping is quite a cool thing to experiment with. It's a different sort of process to limiting or something like that. It's for another video, really. I don't know if this is how people use this plugin. This is how I found a good use for it. Not all the time, but with heavier stuff, it's pretty cool. I've just got one blue blob, and I've times it by 2. I've made 2x with this lever, and I've put one blue blob on there. Sweet. Okay, let's move on to the snare now. So this is the 2 snare mics here, bussed over to this auxiliary. Let's have a listen with no processing to start with. Cool. And for this, I haven't bothered with any kind of gating or anything, because it wasn't like again, this is going back to, I'm not trying to make this sit in with the mix with everything else. So it doesn't have to fit through a load of dense guitars, and it was letting through all the detail and stuff in Ben's playing, and there wasn't anything too harsh on it, so that's why I didn't do that. First in the chain, we have the Fab Filter again. Looks like I'm just notching out something there. Let's have a listen. Yeah, I suppose that there's a little bit of a ringing there that I clearly didn't like. So I've pulled a bit of that out, nothing else really to report home on. I've high passed it at 45, didn't really need the information down there. Next in the chain we have the good old Slate VMR again. Different order this time, just mixing it up. First in the chain, we've got a 1073 Neve Style EQ. That's boosting at 12, giving it about 1.17 dB. And then we've got 6K, 1.16 dB. I just don't even know why I did that. Half a dB at 220. Probably wanted to add some beef and then turned it back down again. Next we have the compressor. You have to sort of experiment whether you want your compressor before or after your EQ. With tone stuff, sometimes, like especially with snares and things, I do like putting a characterful EQ before a compressor. This has got very similar settings to the kick drum in that it's a slow attack, fast release, so we're letting that transient through and giving it some punch and attack. And I've got the virtual channel at the end there. This is probably more the what, you know, traditionally you would hit your EQ and your compressor and then the output stage of your desk. So this one, really nailed it, I guess. I've got it on the Trident setting, and I like the Trident setting on snares, and I like the Trident setting on guitars, FYI. Let's have a listen with that bypassed, and then I'll gradually introduce the elements, much as I did with the kick drum. Okay, I'll just play it with the whole thing bypassed, and then I'll put the whole thing back in. So yeah, that's given it a bit of sunning. Then I've done the same with the Joey Sturgis tones here. Okay, let's just bypass and then engage. With that engaged, it gives it a little bit more punch, doesn't it? Swiftly moving on, let's have a listen to our overheads with no processing. Nice, they sound pretty good. That was the Coles ribbon mics. Ribbon mics are really great for overheads because they have a bit of a natural roll off in their frequency response, so it's nice and smooth for overheads and things. We'll have a listen what I did on here, but if anything, those probably need brightening up a bit. Okay, first up we've got the Omni channel from Waves, the Schoeps Omni channel. Much like the mix rack really, it's got a bunch of different stuff in one thing. So you've got a saturation section, EQ section, there's a de-esser, compressor, a gate, it's got everything you need, and it's trying to do that kind of desk emulation thing again. I'll just start and bypass, and I'll put it on and we'll have a listen. Cool. So that's brightened that up a fair bit. So we've got what we got going on. I'll just give you a quick lowdown. 3.6 dB at about 10k there, so that's quite a bit of brightening with the extreme highs as a shelf. Pulling out a bit of 3k, pulling out a little bit lower down somewhere. I'm boosting about 1:1. Who knows? This is the kind of thing with it. You play around to it, sounds good. It's not. I can't explain to you exactly why I did everything, but that's what I did in this case. So if we turn the EQ off. Yeah, it's just really sort of giving it some more clarity, a bit more crispness to the snare and the hats there. A bit of compression. We've got a lowest ratio there. Very slow attack, fast release. it varies. Sometimes I'll use a fast attack on overheads if I need to clamp down on the snare a little bit, but in this case I've got a slow attack. Haven't gated it or anything. I don't know if the DS is doing much. It's not doing shit. Didn't even need that. All right, so that's what that's doing. And then we've got the Pro Q afterwards this time. I'll often do subtractive EQ before I start messing around with things, but this case I just wanted to just take out a bit low end that I don't need, and I've pulled out a little bit of kind of 257. Write that down, 257. Just a broad thing in the low mids there, just because I probably didn't feel I needed it. I would guess that's something I added on in context once I'd done everything else. Toms wise, I can flick through these a little bit quicker. We've got a sort of expander gate on the toms there. This is the first tom, this is the 8-inch tom. And then the trimmer would have just been where I was probably double checking the phase. And then we've brightened with a 1073. Got a little bit of distressor emulation, just a compressor emulation, and then hitting the desk emulation for the Nation. Let's just have a listen to that with and without the processing. I'll just find a section where he hits that tom. Okay, so I'll just solo it without the plugin on it. And with the plugin. Okay, yeah, just a little bit of punch and clarity. Just keep saying punch and clarity. But that's, you know, two good descriptive words, I guess. Tom 2. Let's have a look at Tom 2. Cool, same thing there. Clarity and punch. We'll use them the other way around this time. I guess I'm guessing what Past Mark did, and I reckon Past Mark copied that plugin across to the next tom and just adjusted the EQ slightly and probably the threshold of the compressor depending on the levels. Don't worry about doing that, it saves you time. And we had a 16-inch tom as well. Let's have a listen to that with and without. This one I didn't gate. Right. Yeah, this one I didn't gate. I clearly, you know, felt it was adding something. The spill wasn't bothering me for whatever reason. It's getting a fair old slap from the compressor there. Yeah, really whacking it, but it sounds cool. There's not always a rhyme or reason. I think that just sounded good to me at the time. There's one band EQ on here doing nothing, all right? I was probably just checking the phase, and that was a quick way to bang up a plugin that had a phase switch on it. Mixing tip for you. Next we've got the Smash. I've labelled it Smash. I think this was the wildcard mic. Okay, let's have a listen to. I'll turn it up a bit. Let's have a listen with nothing on it. Yeah, this was the one that was just kind of facing the kit. It was just more of an afterthought, but I quite like how that sounds. Let's see what we added to it. So we have the Slate digital mix rack as well. I do use other plugins. This is a fairly brilliant plugin, to be fair. I've hit it with the Monster Extreme Dynamic Processor. This is just really kind of vibey compressor. It's really good for smashing up drums. So let's have a listen without that and then with it. Fabulous. So that's that, and that I've just got like a little bit of that in there. So if we listen to the whole kit, where did I settled on this kind of level here, so I'll just bring it up to that level. It's bound to be fairly subtle, but let's see what it adds. Can you hear how it just adds a little tiny bit of presence? If you're on monitors or headphones or something, hopefully you can hear that. Again, it's all these little micro moves, all these little things that kind of add up to something. That's the kind of thing I like. Righty ho, let's have a listen to the room mics. These are the close room mics. Room mic, this is the long egg, aka the AEA R88 stereo ribbon microphone. All right, let's listen to this naked first. Such a cool microphone. You could build a whole drum sound from just that. So let's have a look at what I've done to that. It's got a 1176 emulation followed by the desk emulation. Let's bypass those and then have a listen. Wonderful. So that is just fairly hard compression, just bringing out the character of the room. Let's see what's after that. Pro Q2. This is me pulling out a little bit of what the compressor has brought up in terms of harshness. This is something that when you're mixing a full band or when you've got a drummer that's wailing on a cymbal, you might have to go further with. But let me just bypass it first. So this is just pulling out a tiny bit of mid-range here. I've also high-passed it at around 60. I don't need all that sort of sub-energy going on because we're getting that from the close kick mic. I would have done that EQ move probably listening to some of the rest of the drums as well. As I said, when you've got a full band and stuff going, you do end up being a bit more brutal with things like that, I think. But that did the trick this time. That did. Right. Lastly, let's listen to the corridor mics with nothing on them. Okay, and then we've got the mix rack on here again. Now I tried to keep it simple for this because I knew I'd be doing the video. So although no one's paying me to say this, but something like this, a plugin that has got the ability to have your kind of EQ, dynamics and coloration all in one thing is a really good thing, I think, when you're learning to mix. Just keeping it, without getting carried away and using all kinds of different things and getting confused. It's a really good layout. It's the same with that Schoeps Omni channel as well. It just means you can see what's going on nicely and move things around into different orders, and yeah, keeps it simple. So this corridor mic, we've got a distressor that's on a 6.1 ratio, fastish release, medium. Medium. I'm going to call that a medium attack and a medium release. Then we've got the Revival. This is a kind of saturating colouring thing. Using a little bit of shimmer on that, don't know why. And then we're hitting the desk emulation on a Neve emulation. Okay, so let's have a listen to that without and then with the plugin. Okay, it always bugs me when I've watched videos and stuff. That is doing a fair bit of a gain boost. Okay, so some of that, it obviously sounds way better with the plugins. That's why I put them on there, but it's not a fair test because we're not gain matching. We're not hearing just what the plugins do. So yeah, should have thought about that a little bit more, but you can still hear the effect that those plugins are having. The compressor's adding a little bit of more detail to the room. The shimmer thing is probably barely doing anything. I don't know why I put that on there. And same with the virtual channel. But as I said, these tiny little moves, they help overall. And then we've got the Pro Q again, keeping it simple, pulling out a bit of 307. Write that down. Again, high passing, and pulling out a bit of mid-range as well. Let me just start in bypass and then I'll put it in. So great. So yeah, that's just sculpted that a little bit. Right, now then, we've gone through all the kind of mics now on their own. Let's have a listen to those with that processing on as they are. Nice. Yeah, I reckon that sounds pretty good. I would have spent a bit of time balancing that and just getting that to sound right on its own before getting carried away with other types of processing. Okay, so now we've gone through all the close mics, I'm going to show you a bit of what I do with bus processing. As I explained at the start, this isn't quite the order I would be doing things in, but I'm more showing you round a mix than I am mixing. So this is our main drum bus. I've got various plugins going on it, and I'll just show you through each one. So to start with, we've got the virtual mix rack again, and I've got the Monster Extreme Dynamic Processor on here again. It isn't something I normally do, but I decided this was a good thing for this mix at the time. And what I've done there, by the looks of it, is a type of parallel compression. So this is getting hit fairly hard, but then I've only got the mix at kind of 10%, and then I've got the virtual channel as well. So I'll play you the mix, and then I'll introduce these two plugins. I'll actually start off with the virtual channel, because if I put the Monster in before, you're not really going to hear what the virtual channel's doing. So here we go. Okay, so that's a fairly subtle thing. If I mean, I can show you what this Monster Extreme Dynamics processor is doing if I turn the mix up. Okay, Okay, so yeah, I've just put a bit of that on. I probably put that on somewhere near the end just to give it a little bit more zing and whoop. Next on here I've got the Slate FG Grey. This is emulating a SSL bus compressor. I'll just show you what that one's doing. Okay, so it's just tightening it a little bit really. It was only sort of hitting a couple of dBs in gain reduction. It's got a slow attack and a fast release, and it's around, let's say, 2.5 ratio. And then the cool thing with this one is it's got a high pass filter on it, which is a kind of sidechain thing. So essentially you set where your high pass is, like on an EQ, and anything below that frequency doesn't get affected by the processing, so it doesn't get affected by the compressor, so it won't pump so much and it will let some of that low end energy through without it getting eaten up. And next in the queue we've got a MAG EQ or MAG EQ, don't know how you say that. This is a really great EQ. This is the Plug-in Alliance version, but it's exactly the same as the UAD one. It's got, well, I'll just play you what I've done with it. So first without and then with. Okay, so we've got a shelf EQ. It's only 1 decibel from 2.5 kilohertz up, and then half a dB of sub and half a dB of 40 hertz. So it's just some smooth, sort of subtle low and high boost really. I also really like this on my main mix bus when I'm mixing as well. It's just nice sort of boost, nice musical sounding EQ. That's definitely brightened up and made it sound a bit more exciting. It's a tad too much, but my reason for doing this is because next up is a tape emulation, and this is the Slate virtual tape machines, and I've got it set at 30 IPS, and it's basically at default. I'll play it to you. I'll play it to you without, and then I'll put it in. Fantastic. Yeah, so that just gives it a nice little bit of something. It rounds off the transients a little bit, gives it a little bit of low boost. Putting that EQ before it just helps make up for the fact that you do lose a little bit of top end with tape. But that's not my entire reason for putting that EQ, but I was trying to explain why that was possibly a little bit bright without the tape machine for context. Next I have put yet more saturation. This is the black box. This is also from Plug-in Alliance. I bought this after having a blast with one in a session with the real thing, and I was really impressed by it. The mix is set at kind of 60%. This is just emulating a very expensive bit of tube gear. So I'll just play you without and then with. Yeah, it's cool. It just adds a little bit more something. And then this is more finishing touches to get the level up. So we've just got the Massey L2007 limiter. This is a really cool limiter. It's similar to some of the Wave stuff and that, but I don't know. I prefer the sound of this one, I think. So it's bringing the volume up a little bit, but it's also got a bit of character to it and adds a bit of kind of attack really to it. That's pretty cool. And then finishing off, just got a tiny bit of this Joey Sturgis Tones clipper on there. I'll show you what that's doing. Yeah, that's what that's doing. So that's the main drum bus, and that's everything going through. And as you can hear, like, maybe I'll just play it to you one more time and I'll just bring all those plugins in, and you can hear that I'm actually doing quite a lot of heavy lifting with the stuff that's on there. There's lots of little subtle bits going into it, but it's this stuff that gives it the finishing touches, I think. So that's that, and that's a pretty finished sounding drum sound, but let's see what we can do with a little bit of parallel compression. So this is where I have now bussed the kick close, snare, bit of overheads and toms to another bus in parallel to the main drum bus. And I've just hit that with a compressor. What I might actually do is just show you the process of doing this. This is a really good way to sort of add some density and some excitement to your drums. So I'll put this at Unity and we'll kind of start from scratch on it. Right, let's get rid of what we have here. I'll show you, it might be a good idea to show you a quick way of doing this. So imagine we've just set up this bus. This is bus 13 and 14. Selected the tracks that I want, and I'm gonna hold down Alt and Shift and select bus 13 and 14. Okay, and then I'm gonna hold down Apple Alt H, and it brings up this dialog here. And then I can select, I want it to appear on Insert E, which is the one where I've set these on, and then you can select which attributes you want. So we just want them to be the same volume and panned in the same place. And if we press OK, it then copies the value of these faders up to this bus send, which is really useful. Now, a lot of the time with drums, with parallel compression, you can just send your entire mix there and compress it. But what I must have found when I mix this, and what I often find, is that the reason I'm using the parallel compression is to sort of add some punch and weight and density to the drum mix. So I don't necessarily need a bunch of room mic and stuff in there, and I've already added some compression to the room mics anyway. So this is my kind of underlaying, just last layer of punch on there. Another thing I'm going to do, if I hold down Alt and Shift and click on the pre option here, it means these faders are all being sent pre-fader, but at the set control values that we set up here, they're all pre-fader to this bus. So I can now solo this bus and hear what's being sent to it without worrying about anything else. So this is effectively a submix now of the selected microphones, selected sends at those values coming through to this bus. Okay, so that's that, and then we're going to stick a compressor on it. This is another Slate one I used. I don't normally use this one for parallel compression, but I think because it's a drum kit on its own, it wanted to be fairly naturalistic. A lot of the time with my parallel compression, I'll use a more sort of 1176 style compression on there, which is a little bit more saturated, I suppose. This is a little bit of a cleaner kind of compression. Let's just have a listen. So it's really bringing out the attack on everything there. One thing I've noticed is that I've got quite a lot of kick going through there, and it's eating it up. And the kick is already quite loud in the mix that I've got. So what I'm going to do is go back to this bus here, and I'm just going to back off the click as I listen to it. Yeah, so it's favouring the snare drum a bit more now, which is what we want there. This is what it's sounding like. Okay. If you want a bit more energy and you want to add your room mics and stuff, do try that, and sometimes you'll need that. I'll often stick an EQ after the parallel compression. So with this one, we're doing very much like a clean, attacky sort of compression on it. So it's not bringing up all the cymbals and artifacts too much. I probably don't need loads of low end, so I'll just roll a bit of that off, and I'll just pull it up, listening to the main mix, and we'll just mix that parallel compression in and see what effect it has. Okay, so that's a fairly subtle use of parallel compression when it comes to drums. You can be much more overt with that, and that's something I'll show later on. But this was supposed to be a fairly honest mix of the drums as I hear them, kind of thing. A bombastic version of, albeit, but that is quite a clean parallel compression, just accentuating a bit of attack and stuff and adding a bit of density. Okay, I hope that was useful. We'll go further into this kind of thing later on, and showing you mixing drums in context with the rest of the band, and also kind of trying out some other ideas, trying out, augmenting some of the drums with samples and things like that. It's quite a common, technique. I'll show you how I go about that. But that is an overview of how I go about it. As I said at the start of the video, it's perhaps good to sort of have a bit of mythology, As I said at the start of the video, it is good to have a bit of method when you're approaching a mix, and that goes for the whole mix as well as just the drums. But it does later, it becomes a bit more intuitive, and you'll always be coming back to things. It's not like you kind of mix the drums and then they're done, and then you mix the bass and the guitars, because you'll always be having to adjust those things because of the element of context. Like we've just done drums on their own, but you might find you add your guitars and bass in, and there's elements fighting. But maybe just make sure you stick to a bit of a game plan, and you'll get through the mix a bit easier. And you won't end up chasing your tail and stuff. Said lots of things there. Hope they were interesting. Let me know in the comments and stuff if there's any questions, or if there's any other stuff you want me to look into. Have a splendid day, and look after yourselves.